there are many things in the world that I would like to see accomplished. I would love to see Chile winning the World Cup, the football World Cup, but that's more difficult than any other political aim or objective that I'm going to lay out. So, so politically speaking, I think we're facing global challenges, and we don't have the equipment to confront successfully these challenges. So in the last few years, I've been researching on climate change, or if you want, the political theory of climate change, not the scientific part. And I'm afraid that with the equipment that we have, with the repertoire we have, like liberal democracy, with a capitalist economy, we don't have many tools to win this ultimate battle, so to speak. So what I want to, it's not a dream, it's a desire, of course, is that our political institutions could develop a richer repertoire to confront this problem, especially if you want to put in a slogan, to put more science in democracy and to put more future in democracy.
It's quite uncommon to see scholars from South America participating in conferences in Europe. That's one of the reasons why I was very happy to have this talk with Cristo Bellolio. He has especially worked on climate change and the relationship with liberal democracy, and this is one of the issues that we're exploring today.
Nowadays, our liberal democracy, our political institutions in general, they don't have the obligation to abide by science recommendations, because democracy is a very horizontal, egalitarian sort of system to take decisions. It's a normative project. Instead, science is an epistemic project in which some people know more than others. So people are trained to sort of generate knowledge claims that are supposed to be universally valid. So they're completely two different things. Democratic politics and the scientific sort of method, rationality, as you want. So I think that we need to put more science in democracy, and I'm not entirely sure how we can do that without renouncing democracy, without being, I don't know, technocracy or epistocracy. And the other challenge, I think, is future. Because liberal democracies are mostly concerned about the here and now. So the people who vote are voting thinking about the present. So this sort of presentist bias of liberal democracy, of electoral democracy if you want, I think is problematic to face this, specifically the challenge that climate change poses. So put more science in democracy and put more future in democracy.
Okay, yeah, so if I put it, let's say with my simple words, that would mean to put more science in democracy. So instead of having maybe decisions taken just because a majority wants it, they should be based on knowledge, on scientific knowledge, on scientific...
That's one way to put it, exactly. But the problem is, the whole idea of democracy is that we are all equal.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be smarter than there are some accounts of epistocracy like around. There's this guy Jason Brennan saying that maybe we should just ask those who know what they're doing and not everybody, because people are on average like ignorant. So there's a lot of that kind of sort of Neoplatonic accounts. So my question is, can we remain democratic, but at the same time sort of abiding by the recommendations of science in these kinds of scenarios?
And why do you think we are actually currently not basing our decision on science, but rather like with equality, democracy? Why
That's a good question. Well, I think it's a very natural thing called confirmation biases. So we accept or reject the evidence, the data, if you want, the facts. We accept or reject what science tells us based on whether that evidence will clash or confirm our pre-existent beliefs. So if you are science and you tell me something that is going to make me uncomfortable, that is going to change my way of life, that is going to threaten me, that is going to force me to sacrifice things that I cherish, maybe my sort of psychological disposition will be to say, you know what, I doubt it. So and that's fine, because in democracy, you don't have to sort of explain your decisions based on these kinds of epistemologically robust accounts. You make your choices in the ballot box depending on what you need. I mean, what are your ideological sort of predispositions? So that's the problem. There are two different logics. And I think that one of those logics, the scientific one, should be in a way sort of incorporated in order to have a more complex account of democracy. And I think we are still far from that.
There are still some ways where we can have a bit of an expert opinion, right? I mean, if there is the parliament, there maybe they take decisions, they try at least to base their decision on more expert source.
They can. But they're not forced to do. They don't, I mean, we may say, and I think that most people will say, that they like the public policies to be based on evidence. Evidence-based public policy. I mean, everybody will tell you that. Nobody will tell you that they want public policy or laws or political action in general that is not based on evidence. The thing is, we are in times, and I don't want to be sort of a chronocentric, but we live in times in which, and I'm not entirely sure how much social media and new technologies have influenced the landscape in this sense, but we live in times in which there's a radical epistemic egalitarianism. It's like the old epistemic authorities like PhDs or like the people who used to know better now in, I don't know, Twitter or Facebook or any other social media, is in a symmetrical position with a guy who doesn't know anything about it. So in a way, people are emboldened for this sort of epistemic autonomy and say, you know what? I can decide what is real, even in terms of factual reality, not just values. Of course, we always disagree about whether gay marriage should be allowed. You know, conservative and liberal always have different opinions about this sort of moral controversies. But we used to believe that the factual controversies were adjudicated by science because we didn't have the tools. I don't have any training to adjudicate whether mechanic physics or quantum physics. I don't know. They know. And we used to say, you know, okay, we're going to delegate these kind of inputs on you guys because you know better than us. So give us what's really going on there. Give us an accurate description of the world, and then we take the decision. And that's how democracy works. So we are not obliged, we're not forced, we're not coerced to follow democracy's lead. We can say, okay, this looks interesting, but we prefer to go other way because, let's say, the electoral cost will be too high. So you're right. Parliaments could, maybe should, take expert advice. But what if taking expert advice will mean that they will lose the next election? My guess is they're going to go for the most popular sort of road. And my fear is that in the climate crisis, the most popular will mean the option that basically let you out of the hook, doesn't demand you, doesn't require you to make any sacrifice. Just keep using your car, keep flying in low cost airlines, keep eating meat. And I do all this thing. I drive cars, I fly transatlantic through the world to attend these conferences.
And I flight.
So and some people, I'm talking especially middle classes and working class people who are struggling to sort of achieve certain status, and this status in capitalist societies is many times related to consumption habits, that you can afford, purchase some services, some goods that in the old times only the wealthiest could have, and now you can provide the same good and services to your kids, and that makes you proud. Your family have made some progress in life, and my fear is that that kind of progress could be detrimental, could be harmful for our goals in terms of climate crisis mitigation.
So
we used to believe that there were epistemic authorities, rather uncontested epistemic authorities. We used to believe that, let's say, science in general. And when I say science, I'm not talking about a particular scientific association or community. I'm talking about the grand project of basically trying to, for the first time in human history, to sort of generate cross-cultural knowledge that could reclaim universal sort of validity. That's what I mean by the scientific project, which is a rather modern human project. And that's what we used to call epistemic authority. But epistemic authority is not political authority. And democracy is about who's going to wield political authority. So I think that the challenge is how to incorporate, how to include this epistemic authority into a democratic process without becoming a technocracy.
Well, I have maybe an idea. It's a suggestion. I may tell me if that would work or not.
Please.
I have the solution that you've been looking for.
There are not bad ideas here. So.
For years and years. I mean, I heard about this idea, which is actually very interesting. It looks like a Wikipedia. It's more of a forum. Do you know Reddit, the social network?
Yeah.
So you can put a plus or a minus if what is written seems relevant or not.
Okay.
And there it would be very much based on Wikipedia.
Yeah. Okay.
So the same principle. So everybody is collaborative. Everybody can write. And maybe there's a question at the beginning: should we have this law, for instance, about climate change? And there, everybody can participate. Everybody can put their comment, and people can make a plus or a minus on each argument, so that at the end,
so in a way, it's democratic.
Yeah, in a way, it's democratic because it's made by the people, and then maybe we could still think that there is a vote at the end. I don't.
Yeah, no, that's democratic, but that's not the logic of science. Science does not operate on a democratic vote. Science,
in that case,
science. The problem with science in this specific sense is that it will give you a result that you may dislike. So the scientific ideal attitude is to follow the procedure, follow the method, no matter where it leads. The thing is, you have to accept the result. And maybe you enter this procedure looking for a specific result, but at the end you found a different one, and you have to accept it because you follow the method. So the method is basically the ruling guide. In the case of democracy, the method is counting heads, counting votes, as you say. So I think there are two different logics.
Yeah.
So the logic of democracy is a logic about, if you want, let's say, may sound pejorative, but popularity. So my concern, fear sounds too exaggerated. My concern here is that if you are a politician, if you are a political party, and you are in search of votes, you need votes to get elected. What will you tell you? What's going to be your discourse? Your discourse is going to be, we have to make sacrifice, and you have to leave the car, not to take the plane, and start being like a vegan life. That's one alternative, yes. Or what I think is going to be the most popular, and maybe we can talk about this later, populist as well, saying, you know what, I don't think it's that bad, and if it is, it's not our fault. So you know what, let other other countries pay the bill, and you know what, we have some time, and you know what, there are other concerns as well. So of course, the meat industry and the fossil fuel industry are sort of harming the environment, but we need to move from the periphery, from the suburbs to the city center to work, and we don't have a good public transport, so I'm sorry, we're not going to tax diesel or fossil fuel. So my point is, which one of these two speeches, which one of these two programmatic platforms do you think that's going to be more seductive in strictly electoral terms?
No, of course.
So I'm a friend the latter.
Yeah. So I see the thing, but so let's say at the end, if I try to summarize, you'll tell me if that's not this, but maybe you have two options. Let's say science, which has a very bad news, that it means you will not be able to use your car, etc. Or you have, but at least you will do something for climate change and make the things better. Or you have the option which is much more popular and enjoyable for people, but which is not what is recommended by science.
Exactly. And to put it very simple, that's it.
And that's the dilemma, basically.
In a very bold terms.
Of course.
We're
caricatural.
We're trying to sort of make this dichotomous decision very stark. But there might be more nuanced, subtle solutions in the middle, of course.
But I would say even in that case, maybe I also understand why the second option would be preferred, where it has to be the most popular, because if it's based on science, okay, you know that this is the right thing to do, let's say, for science, but I imagine also that you need also people to be motivated for it, to people to want to do this, because the good thing to do is also, someone may argue, is also the thing that you want to do, you know, it's like freedom here, or it's something that...
That's absolutely true. Actually, science will never tell us what's the right thing to do. Politics decide what's the right thing to do. In which sense? In the sense that we decided to survive as a species, let's say, we're probably in a very grand sort of terms. Let's say that we decided as a species to survive. That's a political decision. So we decided what's right. And that's our goal, to survive, and survive in a very, in a sort of decent way, not survive like in a dystopian Netflix movie. Dystopian, as I mean, living like a good, not just survive, but just live a good life. So that's a political decision. And what science tells us is, in order to achieve that goal, I recommend you to do these things. So, for example, decarbonize your economy to start. If you want to keep growing, economically speaking, if you want to keep sort of growing, try to sort of detach economic growth from CO emissions. So science will tell us, if you have decided already to do that, okay, this is the technical means, if you want. So these are the suitable technical means in order to achieve that goal that you decided politically. But science is not going to tell us, of course, when we're talking about climate science, many people say it comes with the policy, it comes with the recommendations, or it already assumes that we want to survive and we want to live well. Of course, that's a good point. But analytically speaking, they're two different things. The political goals, what we want to do, what we ought to do, is decided democratically nowadays. Science is not in that business. Yeah,
because I mean, also another point I can think of, that maybe it's better for science not to be what decides, so an epistocracy or something, would be that people already, we can see that they have a lot of mistrust against elites, like, let's say politicians, or what they consider as elites, or you know, like the leaders. So if you add on top of that you are directed by some scientific, I mean,
it's a scientific king in a way, Platonic way.
Exactly. And that also you don't control, you don't understand what's happening, you don't control, and there's a need to feel in control, you know, like to.
There's a very interesting debate, and I haven't made my mind on this specific topic. But there's a very interesting debate on whether democracy, not this democracy, but democracy in a more, let's say, perfected way, a kind of democracy that takes into consideration the evidence, the facts, and what science tell us. And a non-corrupt democracy, of course. So there's some debate in the literature and political theory whether democracy in this sort of perfected way will be able to handle the climate crisis, or otherwise we have to say, you know what, eco-authoritarianism. We just there's no way to do this
to convince
democratically. And the time is running. The clock is ticking. And we cannot wait for 25 more years to decarbonize our economy. We cannot decide 30 years to everyone be a hipster and become vegan. I mean, we
we need to impose everybody now.
That means coercion. So that's what I mean by eco-authoritarianism. There are a lot of papers and theories going around that say it's not that we want to become an eco-authoritarian state or whatever political regime. It is that
we have
if we don't take like the difficult decisions now, in, I don't know, 2 decades time, 3 decades time, this is not going to be a choice. This is going to be the only path that we could sort of go forward. So this sort of, I know that it sounds dystopian, this sort of green leviathan, this idea of the scientific king which decides what should we do because you know best. So that's a technocracy in a way. That's an epistocracy in a way. That's what I mean by eco-authoritarianism. I am assuming that an eco-authoritarian of this characteristic will not be the kind of authoritarianism that we have in, I don't know, China or Cuba or North Korea. I'm assuming that it's going to be a sort of enlightened, sort of a despotic government. So that's what I said in a sort of Platonic way. I'm not saying that current authoritarianisms, I'm not saying that Putin or Orban or Erdogan or Maduro in Venezuela, I'm not saying that these kinds of authoritarianism are better equipped to handle the climate crisis by far. Maybe current democracies actually are better than this authoritarianism in the sense that they have civil society's involvement, a fair degree of transparency about the facts, so you can sort of see the statistics and see whether we are achieving our goals or not. In those authoritarian countries, statistics are very opaque, very obscure, so you don't know if they're lying or not. So I'm not saying that current authoritarianisms are better than current democracies. I'm saying that there's going to be a lot of discussion in the future if we don't act swiftly. That may be a sort of enlightened eco-techno authoritarianism that already knows what to do and decide what we should do. So so basically you concentrate in one hand both sort of dimensions of decision making, the factual inputs, the evidence sort of that grounds the decision, and the normative decision itself, two in one hand. Nowadays we have these two stages are separated. So the idea of an eco-authoritarianism means that you put both dimensions in the same hand.
So let's say here, of course, we have a big problem, because indeed I see the point where maybe we need to act very quickly, and that would mean to impose things. And at the same time, we know, I think you agree with this, that authority also comes with a lot of disadvantages, maybe lack of support in the long term, maybe authoritarian drift, like...
Well, authoritarianism doesn't need support.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the whole idea of, you know.
No, I think it does, because if you imagine in France, I mean, I'm French.
Yeah.
Imagine the French Revolution.
Okay.
There's an autocrat, but you need you know, a
Some
minimum,
sort of yeah.
or at least to keep people in control. You know,
actually, you're right. I'm mistaken, because the sort of spin dictators, as they call the authoritarianism of the 21st century, like Putin, like Erdogan, like Orban. Actually, they're pretty popular. So you're right. So
yeah, you can be popular as well. But I mean, also another thing that you know, this is Montesquieu saying that whoever gets some power, so if you put any kind of enlightened dictator, is let's say, is inclined to abuse of this power. So even if you're the most enlightened dictator, maybe you don't stay enlightened.
That's why most of the authors, not me, but most of the authors who write about this, they set specific ideal conditions for this kind of authoritarianism.
Yeah.
So they are not saying that the current authoritarianism are the model to follow. Nobody's saying that. And I agree with you. And actually, so this is maybe a point of optimism, what we saw in the pandemic, in the first year, at least 2020, was interesting, that many restriction measures were actually supported by the population.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was I recall in some month, very strict confinement regulations.
Yeah.
You basically, all your basic rights were suspended. And we supported governments enacting these measures, because we knew that, well, they were extraordinary, they were temporary, and they were in our own best interest. So
yeah,
I don't dismiss the possibility that this sort of eco-enlightened authoritarianism could, to some extent, enjoy popular support. But my point is, when I say authoritarianism, I say that it's not going to be an option.
Yeah.
To change some consumption habits, the kind of consumption habits that give us certain social status in capitalist societies. That's my point. That people don't abdicate what they have achieved through hard work, and they feel they deserve it. People, and I'm talking especially about middle and working class people, say, you know what? The wealthy classes, well, they already enjoy their feast. They already travel around the world. Now, of course, now they're all hipsters and go biking through the cobblestone center of Paris, but and buy expensive food in Whole Foods, organic.
Yeah.
But we are on our way to that level, but just you have to wait for us. I mean, we're not going to change all our consumption habits. And this is especially the case in Latin America. I'm Latin American, so I can see how most of our countries, which of course we are not to blame for this problem, we didn't benefit that much from the Industrial Revolution, and many of our countries say, you know what? I mean, it's not that they say there's not a problem. Of course, they acknowledge, we acknowledge it is a global problem. But many of our countries say, you know what? I think that we have still a long way to go before taking these stringent measures. We still want to build some industries. We still want to sort of. So I think that's problematic, because we are electing governments, and I'm talking about populist governments in this specific sense, that basically do not ask the people for changes. We are electing governments that are very good at blaming others, instead of asking the people to change their lifestyles. So
you mean we're going back a bit to the beginning. So it's at the end, we are electing people who prefer to not to hear too much about what scientists are saying. Nobody and raising the alarm.
Nobody wants bad news.
That's not comfortable. That's not a good thing. And so the people we have in government, you're saying they prefer, they're not listening enough at the end to...
Because they care about the here and now. And in a way, electoral democracy, if you think through, it doesn't have to be concerned about future generations. I mean, when you go, if you have an election this Sunday in any country, who votes? The people who are alive.
Not the future generations.
Not the future generations.
They don't have a voice.
They don't have a voice. And the problem with democracy, and we can sort of connect with my second sort of expectation for the future, is this idea that how can we put the interests of future generations, who are going to be the generations that are going to suffer the worst case scenarios of the climate crisis if they happen. So how can we include those interests in a decision-making procedure that by definition sort of ignore them? The problem of long-termism, if you want. And there's a lot of interesting people writing about this, about our problem of short-termism and how can we include this sort of long-termist view, and global warming or climate change or the climate emergency, whatever you want to call it, is sort of quintessentially one of these long-term problems. So the problem with climate change is that the causes and the effects are dispersed in time and spatially as well. So it's very difficult to govern that separate. So that's why my original point. I don't think that we have political institutions already well equipped to deal with this kind of very tricky problem.
Yeah, that makes me think that at the end we could think of the same thing at the individual level. I don't know for you, but very often we also think, I mean, short term for our like, you know, I'm gonna eat this delicious food even if I regret tomorrow, or I'm gonna drink this alcohol even if I regret tomorrow.
Absolutely. I'm not it's a very important point. I'm not doing any moral grandstanding, or I'm not here to silently here. I mean, when I say that we have confirmation biases, we all have, but, and we don't want to resign our lifestyle. So,
but I think it's interesting to notice it, because then I'm thinking, what makes us, then at one point maybe, we start to think a bit more long term. But what makes us?
But our brains did not evolve for that. We're primates.
There's this, I mean, there is this. We are looking for instant gratification, but we are evolving a bit in a sense
when we discovered sugar, we were like,
But you see, even for that, like, I mean, it happens to me. Sometimes I stop to drink, for instance, but because I was thinking, okay, in the short term, I really like it, but in the long term, I know it has bad effects. So,
but we do it no matter what. We do it.
But you know, one thing that the reason why I stopped, to drink, or at least I'm trying to, is because I discovered it really has bad effects. So I'm scared that the bad news here is that we need to feel badly the effects until we change our mind.
I think that's probably true.
And sadly, that would mean we need to feel really bad effects of climate change.
I think you are right.
And that's a bad news, but
I mean, if we don't see the monster at the face, basically, it is still a possibility, a cognitive possibility, because it is economic for our minds, basically, to dismiss this threat unless we face it,
unless we really feel it.
Exactly. So
and there, because I'm still trying to find some sort. At the end, it's a bit my objective with this talk, but would it go in the direction of somehow we should have people get a feeling of the bad consequences that would happen? So it could be done, I mean, very basically with movies, art, or something like this. Do you think that could help, for instance?
That could help, and I would love that through education. through culture, because all the other examples that you put are culture, basically, to distinguish from the political. When I use political in a very institutional sense. So politics is the legitimacy of coercion, or the justification of coercion. That's for me politics in this sense. All what happened in the background culture, as John Rawls used to say, is universities, is movies, is so that's perfect. If we can change through culture, that's best scenario. It means that we hadn't the need to recourse to coercion. My problem is, what if culture is not enough? So that's a question. I'm not saying that that's going to happen. I'm not saying that it's preferable. I'm saying, of course, I would prefer. We all would prefer to voluntarily undertake certain changes that will possibilitate a sustainable environment for our future generations to live in a sort of decent way, of course. But the problem is, what if culture is not enough? And I think that we are always striving for instant satisfaction. In the pandemic, for example, I think Chile was not the only country, but Chile, my country, for example, authorized people. Of course, the pandemic came with an economic crisis attached. So they authorized people to take the pension savings in order to basically try to face the crisis, the economic crisis, to have some money to eat, to live through those very complex months. And all the experts disadvised it. All the experts said, this is a horrible idea. If we take our pension funds, that means that they will not have money in the future. When they got pensioned, there won't be any money. Pensions are already scarce. They're going to be worse if you take the money now. And secondly, it's going to be an inflation that is going to be terrible, especially for the working classes, because their purchasing power is going to be very, very affected. And I'm not joking. Not a single think tank, liberal, conservative, said that this was a good idea. All experts, all Minister of Finance, no matter what ideological bent they were, wrote columns, sort of letters saying this is a horrible idea, please, anything but this. And the Congress,
they did it.
And why they did it? Because 85% of the population were supporting the idea. People were saying, like, even people like me, because I didn't lose my job, I was still like doing classes through Zoom, suddenly have available fresh money to pay debts, to buy a new car, to make that refurbishment of your house that you are aiming to do for a long time, or to do a trip. Why not?
Amazing in the short term.
Instant satisfaction. And last year we paid the consequences in terms of inflation, in terms of how affected our purchasing power was, and of course now there's a lot of people without a single dollar, a single peso, we say, in the saving. So that's presentism working in real time.
So I mean, okay, we're back to this dilemma, like always. We're quite stuck. Maybe I'm thinking, would it be amazing? I'm not sure also it's so possible, but that, for instance, after such an event, the population realized, okay, we want to do this, but we did shortism. Like, we realized that was a bad choice. We just think short term, and maybe for the future we will again think in terms of short term. So maybe we should put this time an institution that for the next crisis.
That's a very good point. Because if we don't want to evolve into a technocracy or an eco-authoritarianism, you may think that we should adapt our political institutions in order to take scientific advice seriously.
Yeah.
The same with the future.
Yeah.
And there are some countries, of course, Scandinavian countries,
they're the best.
Usually think this before all of us.
Yeah.
They have I don't know how it is in English, but sort of future commissions or commissions about commissions for the future or about the future. I don't know exactly what is the technical name, but it's basically a commission of people, a group of people, an advisory sort of board, and every time that Congress, the Parliament, is discussing or debating a law, a policy, a rule, whatever, that is going to have impacts in the future, this advisory board, this commission for the future, elaborates like a document, say, you know what, good, bad, these are going to be the possible outcomes. So they are, in a way, representing, as a sort of trustees of the future, they are representing the interest of future generations. So in this case, a commission of the sort would have said to the Congress, this is a horrible idea. Probably the Congress will do otherwise anyway, because it's an advisory, not they don't have a resolution power. That's the problem. But you're right. So a good idea.
So maybe
a good idea. And we can think about this in a national level or in a global level. There's some guys, there's some people actually thinking about a sort of a constituent assembly, a global constituent assembly, a constitution for the world that takes into account this element, the element of the future.
I imagine for climate change, or I mean, when it concerns the whole planet, probably that's more relevant at the international scale.
But again, we haven't started to speak about the problems of national governance, or like nation-state governments, and the fact that we don't have a world government with the capacity to enforce any of this in a global level. So that's
still
makes the problem project. Exactly. So
so okay. I mean, I'm afraid my personal view is sadly that we'll need to have kind of a disaster, a crisis or something, so that people really feel the need to do it. But then I have a lot of optimism in a sense, because I think, okay, this crisis will happen, but then we'll get stronger and we'll put that in place. We'll put institutions for the future.
I hope. I'm
sadly, after some harm.
I don't have a bleak or like structurally pessimistic view. I'm just saying that we should problematize these things, make these questions before, in order to have some reflections already done when this, and of course I'm not the only one. I mean, there's a lot of people thinking about this much better than me. But the thing is, I'm not saying that the future is going to be a dystopian movie. I'm saying that if some of the worst case scenarios realize, I think that the kind of political institution we have today will not be enough. So we have to start thinking seriously, not just in political theory conferences, but like with real impact on political institutions. What changes should we start to perform? And so that's basically my academic project, my intellectual project, and of course political project in that specific sense as well. I think that you are right, maybe, but the problem is that structural optimism is dangerous too, because many people say, you know what?
It's gonna be fine, so we don't need to do.
Humanity has faced many challenges in the past, and here we are. We have endured. And actually the pandemic was a very good example. The last pandemic, La Peste Negra, and then the black was in the middle of the 90s, and it killed I don't know how many millions of people. And now
1/3 of Europe.
And now in less than a year we had a vaccine. The nation state plus science did they work, and now it was a bad dream. Like the pandemic is like it's like a bad dream. So we are sort of
past, right? It's like
exactly. So we're proud of our mighty power to overcome problems in the past.
Maybe that's giving too much confidence.
And there's some part of the literature, for example, who actually deals with the whole geoengineering expectation. There's some people say, you know what? When things get very, very complicated, we can bomb the clouds and make a hole in order for the gas go out, and through this geoengineering, through this technology, we will sort of gain a few years in the fight against the climate crisis effects, and maybe if we succeed in that geoengineering, we don't have to make so much changes in our way of life. So actually, there's people who is structurally optimist and think that these kind of technologies will solve the problem. I don't have the competences to know whether they are right or wrong. But what if that plan fails?
For sure, I think some levels of anxiety are healthy. Even if that anxiety turns out to be like that was good to be anxious, or that was not necessary to be anxious. At the end, it went all well. Maybe being anxious, helps with finding solutions and.
In a certain doses, yeah. Of course, we don't want climate hysteria. Hysteria.
Yeah.
Why we don't want climate hysteria? And go back to the political point. We don't want climate hysteria because climate hysteria will create a backlash. So the kind of Greta Thunberg sort of hysteria. I don't want to talk bad about her. I'm just basically portraying
the mediatization
of this sort of child that is always mad about the world, complaining that the grown-ups don't do anything about the planet. This kind of the way in which she is portrayed as a sort of fanatism about this problem will create, and it is creating. It's not about the future. It is creating now. Sort of a backlash. Part of my research is to understand what are the sort of identitarian elements at play in this backlash. This which have populist elements, libertarian elements. This idea that you are not the rebel. We are the rebels. We are the rebels that we don't want to conform with this green hegemonic discourse. We don't want to go into this hysteria. I'm going to live as I please. I'm going to eat my barbecue. I'm going to take my plane. I'm going to and I think this backlash, in the same way that the sort of identity wokist progressive discourse of the left created a cultural backlash that's been very productive for right-wing movements around the world. So my concern is that too much green speeches, too coercive, too moralizing, too grandstanding, too sort of paternalistic, will create a sort of an anti-green backlash. So
I get your point, and maybe that's also then. I mean, a bit similar to what we were saying with even if there was an epistocracy or a science government, because then it would be imposed, no problem anymore. But also, it's very paternalistic as well.
It is. And some people will react against paternalism
badly. So unfortunately, I have to leave because I have a train and so on. But that was very fascinating. Would you agree to trying to do a quick summary of what we've discussed, or would you prefer that I try to do that?
You can do it as well. I think that we can back to the first minutes of conversation. I think that our democratic institutions are not well equipped to deal with a problem such as the climate crisis, and I think that we might need to put a bit of science into democracy, understanding that democracy by itself should not abide by science necessarily. It's a different thing, and we should put a bit of future in democracy as well, understanding that the democracy as it is doesn't take into account the interests of future generations. So if we can navigate through these two ways, I think we can make some progress.
Thank you very much. I think it's the perfect summary. Wouldn't have done better. So thank you so much, and bye-bye.
Bye.